This is EU Geology Earth News. I want to talk a little more about the basalt. First, the basalt in Kingman. The geologists that I spoke to regarding this were from the BLM, Bureau of Land Management. They make geologists available to the public quite often. They usually have one, not 100% of the time. Everywhere I go, I stop and try to find geologists, either at universities, colleges, junior colleges, Forest Service, BLM, rock shops, trying to find out the standard explanation of everything that I'm seeing. After waiting patiently and listening to the standard explanation while biting my lip, I then share my catastrophic ideas, which often doesn't go real well. It's sort of an attack when you hear what I'm proposing. It's so different than what they've just described. But quite often, I find an audience, and they seem to be open to a catastrophic model. In Kingman here, I had a memory of my first meeting, and they were talking about the basalt coming from Peach Springs. I think he said 50 miles. I think, as the crow flies, I think if you go by car, it's about 60 miles. And he told me the story, so I took a couple of friends there after or actually it was before the EU conference in Las Vegas a few years ago. One of them is a physicist with a PhD. The other's a scholar. And I was afraid because I thought maybe I didn't get it right. I didn't understand what they were telling me, and I'm going to look like an idiot. It's like, geez, I hope this goes okay. So we got there, and it was a different geologist, but he had the same story concerning Peach Springs. That's the probable source of the basalt, 50 miles to the east. And some of this area is very high. This area in Kingman, if you go north, it keeps going up in elevation. So it would be difficult to have flowed there. It has to go downhill in a flow. And the other area, it doesn't seem like it would be high enough. There'd have to be this massive amount of erosion between Peach Springs and here. So the second geologist said that because Peach Springs was so problematic, there were actually geologists in Oatman to the west looking for the source. But that was even more problematic, or they would have gone there first. But they were kind of desperate. When we went outside after speaking with the geologist, my friends were almost falling on the ground with laughter. They were holding it back the whole time the geologist was explaining these flow stories. So fortunately, my memory didn't fail me, and they have a really bizarre explanation for the basalt you're looking at. But it's not just here. It's everywhere. The entire western U.S. has basalt on the tops of formations that supposedly flowed there, with all of the basalt that would be required to explain it having disappeared and or evaporated. No trace of it whatsoever. So now we're going to go to Tonopah and look at a place there that has basalt. When I was in Tonopah very recently, I stopped at a place that sold Western stuff and asked if anybody knew about the geology. It's a gold mining region. And they said there was no geologist there, but across the street at a place that sold rocks, there was a geologist. So I went across and talked to the gentleman. He was very nice, and he explained the standard theories about the gold. It's not quartz veins, but it's quartz pockets in rhyolite. Many times it's veins, but that's not the case here. And then I looked across the street and pointed and said, "What's that stuff up there on the top of the hill?" And he said it was basalt. And I said, "Well, is it welded tough? Did it come via the air?" And he said, "No, it's a flow." I said, "Oh, great. Where are the vents? Where did it come from?" And he said, 40 miles to the west. And there's a big valley between any possible source and this basalt. And this is the top of a hill. All of these formations are at the top of the hills with basins surrounding them that don't drain anywhere. It's the basin and range. It's salt licks at the bottoms of the hills because it doesn't drain anywhere. You get water in the spring and then it evaporates and you get salt. So that didn't make a lot of sense that it would come from 40 miles to the west. At which point I confessed that I'm a catastrophist. And he said that he was a catastrophist too. And all of a sudden he listened to my theories and he kind of got it. which was really rewarding. I'm going to be going back. He wants to talk again. I've given him the addresses of the websites, suggested reading Worlds in Collision and Earth and Upheaval, as I do every day to strangers. Um, so let me show you where this is at. So this is Tonopah. I was driving north up 95. Somewhere around here is where I stopped, just as I was leaving town. This might be the formation. This might be it. I think this is the one. I'm looking back this way. And in reality, the basalt source is way over to the west. A couple more clicks going out. So here we have Tonopah. And the basalt, I don't think, came from this mountain. That's too close. It's not 40 miles. This would be the 40 miles. And this is a massive valley. It's really big. And this is the top of a hill, like I was saying. So it would have to start very high to flow downhill and get here. And this is everywhere you drive in the West, all the way from Washington State to New Mexico. This is not unique. This is the norm. And there are details about this which also lead you to believe that it's not from a flow. I'll get into that in future YouTubes. So, yeah, this is a pattern that I wasn't looking for. I wasn't looking for a fight. I didn't think I'd find anything interesting when I went to BLM. I'd just get a standard story and you'd be able to trace back the basalt to a source. Because when there are basalt flows, you can always go back and see where they came from, and nothing evaporates. And it's broken and crunchy and ropey, and it looks nothing like the tops of these formations, which are so flat. So, yes, I believe the dust was so hot that it actually was sort of a liquid, which is why it's so flat in many places and doesn't make more of a mountain-type formation. This was kind of runny in some instances. So just a few more details on basalt. I have a few more YouTubes to do on the subject. Thank you.